Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Over the last 5 years, we've seen crisis after crisis. It began with COVID-19 and Ambassador Saran, then we saw the semiconductor crisis that shook the world. You had the Ukraine-Russia war, which we're still grappling with. We've not found a solution. You've seen the Middle East crisis, the Israel-Hamas war, the Israel-Iran war, and the Middle East continues to be on the edge. Every day when we get up, there is some sort of upheaval or the other, and you have a president in the United States who wants to make sure that it's always America first and American interests are always benefiting. And India also is having a problem with the United States. We are managing our relationship. We have a strong strategic partnership for the future, but there are challenges when it comes to certain aspects of the trading partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no one better to understand the current geopolitical situation, the geopolitical chaos that we see than Ambassador Shyam Saran, somebody who has been our foreign secretary. He has been the special envoy on the Indo-US nuclear deal, contributed a great deal to the civil nuclear agreement with the United States. And also he was the special envoy to the Prime Minister on climate change. So Ambassador Saran, without wasting more time, let me begin by asking you, is global chaos the new normal?
Well, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms, no? If it was normal, then we would not have chaos. So I think what we are facing is chaotic. I do not think that it is normal in the sense that this is what the future is going to be, and this is, the landscape that we will be, dealing with for the foreseeable future. So I think we have to focus attention on what are the drivers of this change which is taking place. There are some factors which are more fundamental, more seminal in character. Others may be just cyclical. The question that has been raised is what Trump is doing something that will last only for the 4 years of the presidential term, or is this something which will continue post-Trump as well? And the answer to that is that there are certain things which will continue even when Trump is not there, but there are other things which will perhaps be very different from what we are seeing today.
Right. Now, let me ask you about multipolarity. India has always believed in non-alignment. We believe in a multipolar world where we will stand for our interests. Is this working with Donald Trump?
Well, I don't think that we should look at multipolarity in terms of whether it is working for India in one relationship or not. Multipolarity is really a certain state. It's not a certain choice. Multipolarity exists because today you have a larger number of more substantial powers who have emerged in terms of their economic capabilities, in terms of their technological capabilities, in terms of their military capability. So the diffusion of power is a reality. So it's not that, in dealing with Trump, somehow or the other, we have to make a choice between multipolarity and unipolarity. I do not think that's the case. But I think it is certainly true. The question is raised whether or not we should succumb to the kind of pressures which we are facing from the United States, or should we really continue on a path which we determine is really in India's long-term interests. I think that should be the test of what we should be doing, rather than get caught in this debate about, you have to somehow ally with the United States if you want to save yourself, or you have to somehow or the other make up with China, even if it means that you have to give up some, or sacrifice some interest in doing that. I do not think that's the case here. I think India is in a good place today. Good place because if you look at something which has been mentioned again and again, that we are one of the few large economies, emerging economies, which are still growing at a reasonably rapid rate. Secondly, this is a very large country, 1.4 billion people. It is also a huge market. And very importantly, in a situation where we see a lot of political turmoil, a lot of political instability. Even in countries like, for example, in Europe, you have India, which you may not agree with the nature of the political dispensation here, but it has provided a long period of political stability. These are major assets which we can leverage.
Right. Ambassador Saran, keeping in mind current challenges, you know, when your relationships are getting challenged, we are getting caught up between US and China as well. Does India's foreign policy today need a reset?
No, I do not think that a reset is required. But, you know, when you are facing a dynamic situation, obviously you have to make adjustments in your policy. So, if you want to call it a reset, maybe you can call it a reset. But I would say that, you know, in a changing environment, you have to be very agile. You know, you have to be very nimble-footed. So that while the guiding principle of your foreign policy is the search for strategic autonomy, the manner in which you pursue it will require different kinds of shifts, and those shifts you are seeing already. So, if you have Mr. Trump putting pressure on India, you also see that there is a move by India and China to improve their relations. Because by improving their relations, the ability of other powers to exploit the differences between the two would be diminished. Not entirely removed, but diminished. So you have to keep making these adjustments all the time. But I think the North Star for you has to be the ability of India to make choices that are in line with its own vital interests.
Important point there. And I think a question that a lot of people in the audience would be trying to understand, especially our key business audience from India and around the world, Ambassador Saran, who are tuning in, is what's happening with the India-US trade deal. And Ambassador Saran, ladies and gentlemen, is someone who's worked very closely with the United States. You know, we were hearing right noises, and even now, there are positive messages coming from the White House that Donald Trump has gone on to say that, yes, we are close to a trade deal, we're working on it. The problem seems to be agriculture, problem seems to be dairy, there is a threat of BRICS tariffs, then you've got a threat of a 500% tariff due to our imports of energy from Russia. So what's taking so long as far as this deal is concerned?
Well, as you said, you know, we are not the only one. You also saw that there was an announcement that, you know, maybe Japan will have a deal very, very soon. Japan is nowhere near the deal at the moment. There are doubts being raised about the possibility of a deal with the European Union, which was also supposed to be very close. So I don't think we should be too much bothered about this so-called delay in coming to a deal, because, you know, this kind of, you know, trying to keep your trade partners off balance all the time so that you can get a better deal, this will take you only so far and no further. And I think you are already seeing that this kind of approach that Trump has adopted in terms of trade is already reaching a point of diminishing returns. Why do I say that? Look at the European Union, which has now started talking about, very clearly, about retaliation. Secondly, more importantly, it is looking for other partners to have some kind of a coordinated strategy towards the United States of America. Because what has Trump been doing? He's picking off one trade partner after another, all bilaterally. So the answer to that, I think, is coming, that, you know, trade partners, major trade partners, will perhaps have a better negotiating position if they were able to band together. And that particular trend is already there. So I feel that in terms of, you know, the efficacy of the kind of strategy that Trump has adopted, that will not continue to deliver as much as he thinks it would.
You know, considering that the US is wanting India to compromise on core national interests, we've not given in on agriculture and dairy in any trade deal for that matter. You want us to move out of BRICS as well. You want to compromise on our relationship with Russia. Do you think at some point it would be wise for India to say that, sorry, we'll have to walk away?
Well, you know, number one, I see no reason why we should, you know, succumb to any kind of demand which is being made by the United States of America if it is not in our interest. That is for us to determine whether or not our continuance in the BRICS is beneficial to us or it is not beneficial to us. Even when India was much weaker than it is today, when India's interests were at stake, it was ready to stand all alone. So you take, for example, in the late 60s, you had the Non-Proliferation Treaty. India was perhaps the only developing country which said, sorry, we will not sign this treaty, even though not only was there pressure on India from the US, much more powerful at that time, but also pressure on us from our partner, at that time, strategic partner, the Soviet Union. But yet, India stood its ground. So what I'm trying to put across is that if you look at Indian history, certainly as an independent country, whenever there has been a situation where our interests are being threatened, India has not backed away from taking a stand. So there may be some risk in doing that, but I think my understanding is that if it comes to that point, India will take a stand.
Right. That indeed is important, that India will take a stand. If we need to walk away, we will. Ambassador Saran, also to understand, in this current scenario, and we saw this during Operation Sindoor, and it's now publicly available. You've got the Defense Secretary who has said that yes, China was helping Pakistan during Operation Sindoor. The Deputy Chief of Army Staff has also said so. So when your two adversaries, Pakistan and China, are working so closely together, your relationship with the United States is very strong. It is a futuristic relationship, but currently it's transactional because you've got a transactional president there. Russia is ironclad partners with China. What does India need to do? Do we need to establish some ironclad friendships for the future?
There are no partnerships which are ironclad. I mean, that is not something in my vocabulary as a diplomat, that, there are ironclad partnerships.
Because China and Pakistan always refer to each other like
they
that.
would describe it as a ironclad partnership. Don't forget, China and Russia have said that they have established a partnership of no limits. And yet, do they not have a history of, completely being opposed to each other? Despite being communist countries, both of them? So there is nothing written in stone as far as the relations between states are concerned. Ultimately, states have to decide their partnerships on the basis of what is in their country's interest. It is certainly true that from, say, 1960 to 1990, given the geopolitical situation that we were confronted with, a strategic partnership with the then Soviet Union made a lot of sense for us. It stood us in very good stead. When the Cold War ended, Soviet Union collapsed. At that time, India did have to make a shift. And it did make a shift. In 1990, it was faced with a twin crisis. Not only a geopolitical crisis, but also an economic crisis. And yet it was able to successfully come through that crisis and adjust its foreign policy, which is what I was saying beforehand. So I think to think in terms of, we have to look at trusted friends, we have to look at, relationships which will, perennially sort of be very solid, no matter what changes are taking place in the world. That never happens. I mean, history tells you that never happens. So I think the best thing for us to do is look at the current geopolitical landscape, see what our interests are in this landscape. Today, I think most important objective for India is that its growth story should continue, should perhaps even accelerate. In that context, what are the relationships which will really stand us in good stead? And in that context, I would say that some of the changes that you see taking place already, take, for example, India's relationship with the European Union. You see a new energy in that. You see a certain willingness on the part of the European Union in terms of the trade agreement itself, making certain adjustments, positive adjustments from our point of view, which they were not ready to do before. Why? Geopolitics. So wherever there are, opportunities offered to you, you should try and grab those opportunities for the simple reason, when the geopolitical situation is frozen, like it was during the Cold War, there are very few places in which you can expand. When the global political situation is so much in flux, that is when opportunities arise for emerging countries like India to really expand into the opportunities which are offered.
Right. Ambassador Saran, we're running out of time, but final questions now on China. Are we trying to shift our policy? Is there a policy shift that we're seeing vis-a-vis China? We are making those overtures to put some stability at least in the relationship. But for the moment, it seems that China is putting strong informal sanctions on us in every way.
Well, they are putting informal sanctions on all their trade partners. So I don't think it is specific to
magnets.
They are in a stronger position than we are, as far as our dependence on several very, very key components and things like magnets or some of the rare earths. This should be a wake-up call for India, because actually in many of these areas we have indigenous capabilities, we have indigenous resources. Why have we not developed them? So I think while we try to reduce over time our dependence on China, more importantly, we should try and develop our own capabilities in these areas. What I'm talking about in terms of India-China relations is that both countries are looking at what is a very, very changing geopolitical landscape. They are looking at how what Trump is doing, what the United States is doing, is affecting adversely their own prospects for the future, and see that a limited improvement in relations between the two countries is in both countries' interests. Will this mean that they will suddenly become friends tomorrow? Certainly not. But I think the kind of confrontation which has been there for the last 5 years, that certainly, I think, is improving, and that is in India's interests.
All right. That's a very important note to end on. Any theme that you'd like to leave us with for the future, sir, that India should keep in mind?
Well, since there is a large business leader, presence here, I would only put on my hat as a former climate change envoy, and say that if you're looking at risk for the future, that you should really, make yourself ready for, it is climate change. And I'm very, very, sad to see that there is a retreat, at least internationally, on that particular challenge. I think India has the possibility here to really take the lead in this respect, because this is one area which perhaps a challenge that we are all underestimating, and we need to wake up to that danger.
And we're retreating. After 3 years, you will have a new administration in the US. And yeah, things will change. Thank you so much, Ambassador Saran. It was fantastic talking to you. It was indeed a masterclass in geopolitics.
What a fabulous, fabulous session, sir. Thank you so much.
There's nothing ironclad